First, a comedian who's never afraid to tell it like it is.
Good evening, I'm Mark Thomas and welcome to the Manifesto, coming to you from the Gulbenkian Theatre in Canterbury, Kent. This is the show where the audience offer up policy suggestions in advance and on the night to improve the world or at least their lives. And tonight we examine and discuss these ideas before putting them to the vote to select a policy to enter our manifesto. Tonight's agenda includes to introduce a land value tax. Now, Peter Smith, I want you to read out your policy, Peter.
It's called land value tax. So you've got land and all of the natural resources, oil, even the electromagnetic spectrum, the commons, everything that nature gives us.
OK, now you're saying that you want a land value tax. And what would that be for?
Well, that would pay for all public services, so we could get rid of all the other taxes.
That's quite optimistic, isn't it?
There's lots of serious economists who've talked about this.
I know, seriously, I went and talked to some. Yeah. I did actually go and talk to a load of serious economists about this. I spoke to Professor John Mulbauer, who's a professor of economics from Oxford University. I also spoke to Professor Ian McLean, professor of politics at Oxford University. In fact, he's marvellous. We were recording and we accidentally sent him to the wrong address. And he didn't turn up at the recording studio. And we were recording in 59 Dean Street, and he eventually came round and he said, "Oh, hello, how are you? Here's a cup of coffee, all of that. Lovely to see you." I said, "Are you OK?" He said, "Yes, absolutely marvellous." He said, "But you did send me to the wrong place." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes, you sent me to 56. I said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry." I said, "What's at 56? "It's an HIV testing clinic." Yeah. Yes, I walked in there and said, "Hello, I'm here for the interview." I had a nice chat with these people, and they're going, and they said, narrow the scope of it. This is where they started. They said, narrow the scope of it. What if you could get rid of stamp duty, business rate, and actually get rid of council tax all in one go? What if you could get rid of all of those things, because they all fail to work, they all fail in their thing. Stamp duty, so anyone with a house over 150 grand sale, then you have to pay a proportion of that to the government. What happens is people who are very rich actually take the transaction offshore, so they don't pay it. If your house is worth 151 grand, you go, right, we'll do 148 grand for the sale, and then we'll charge you 3 grand for the curtains, or whatever. So people dodge the tax very easy. Very simple thing is that people will often benefit in the rise of the value of the home through no work of their own. So if you look at the Jubilee Line extension in London, people all along that tube line their houses have increased disproportionately higher than other people in London because of that line going in. So a line built with public money, suddenly these people find their houses and the value of it going up. And that was all because of public investment. So it's quite nice to say, if the value goes up like that, we'll get a bit of it back and it goes back into the public purse. That was the theory of it. What do we reckon? One over there, yeah?
I've got a nice big garden,
yeah.
And I've got foxes, and I've got frogs, and I've got lots of bird feeders in my garden. Am I going to pay more tax or less tax?
You pay a tax. Well, it depends what band you're in. It depends. I spoke to economists about this, and he said,
from the city.
You're quite posh.
Oh, very.
Sorry, I didn't realise. The thing is,
I hide it well.
The thing is actually that the economists I spoke to said because the loading of the weight of council tax is actually on poorer people, it means that actually if you get a land value tax, it will be cheaper for you because you'll pay less. If you are in one of the top bands, right, one of the top bands of council tax, then, well, you've assured me that you are, and I'll assume you are, and you're not just trying to show off. The thing is that actually then you deserve to pay more, because at the moment it's unfair, because the way it works is people with more money, with property of higher value, actually pay less of a percentage of their income than people at the bottom. So, yeah, you would pay more. I'd make sure you did. But obviously, I'd come round and look at your foxes. Do we have anyone else? Who's got hands up over here? We've got one over there. Yes.
I think if you're going to tax everybody so that they can't develop, or if they develop any land, then who's going to do any development? Who's going to employ people? Who's going to have factories? Who's going to have, I mean, what? You know, people could say, well, forget it. I won't develop it. I'll just leave it empty.
Well, no, that's the whole point. At the moment, people are leaving it empty and they're not developing it. And actually, the point is, if you actually have a percentage of, if you're saying the value of the land is the thing you tax. So if you've left it empty and you're not generating income, you still pay that money. So it's an incentive to do something rather than to leave it.
You just left it empty and said, well, I'll make it a meadow, or I'll make it so animals can run wild.
Well, I'd imagine we'd have some special scheme where you could transfer it. But I'm sure you would have a view on that.
The idea of land value tax is just as you say, it's about efficiency. So you make efficient use of the land, and that means more land can then go back to wildlife. So if you do want to say, if you want to put it in a legal way of making the land a nature reserve, it's got no value if everybody agrees that's a good thing to do. So having a restricted covenant or wildlife trusts or RSPB have nature reserves, you can then have that. It's got no value, but it has to be forever. You can't just... The problem we've got at the moment is the government gives massive subsidies to farmers every year. Charities have to pay millions of pounds to landowners to save wildlife.
Let me just look at this idea that we do business tax, council tax, and get rid of the stamp duty. What do people think to that one?